Are you fond of riddles?
Tell me, where does the real power lie?
Power is a curious thing.
Knowledge is power.
Why do we pretend kings hold all the power? Power resides where men believe it resides. A very small man can cast a very large shadow.
The deck is stacked. The rules are rigged.
There is no right or wrong. Not anymore. There's only being in and then being out.
All right, let's dive into this one. The 48 Laws of Power by Robert Greene.
Oh, this is a good one. This book, it's been around for over 2 decades, and people are still talking about it.
Yeah. I mean, why is that? Why is it still so popular? What is it about these laws that's got everyone so intrigued?
Well, I think it's because Greene, he doesn't sugarcoat anything. He presents power, like straight up. Like a science almost.
Yeah.
You know, the nitty-gritty, the behind-the-scenes stuff, the stuff people don't always like to talk about.
Yeah.
He uses these historical figures, kings, queens, con artists, to show how these laws have always been in play, throughout history.
Right. So from what I've read, he's not just giving you a list of rules. Each law, it's like he breaks it down, gives you a whole blueprint.
Oh, absolutely. Yeah, he breaks it down into these sections. You've got judgment, which is like the core idea of the law. Then there's observance, which gives you examples of the law in action, like historical examples. And then there's a section called transgression, which tells you what happens when you break the rule. Like, what are the consequences?
Oh, I like that.
Yeah. So it's like a 360 view, You see the law from all angles, the good, the bad, the ugly.
Right. So you're not just learning the rules, you're learning how to use them and maybe more importantly, how not to use them.
Exactly.
Okay, so we've got these 48 laws all broken down, super detailed, but I think what really brings them to life are the examples.
Oh, for sure. For sure. Greene, he doesn't just talk about these things abstractly. He uses real stories, real people to illustrate each law. Like, for example, Queen Elizabeth I.
Okay.
She was a master at using courtly love to, distract her enemies, consolidate her power.
Wow.
This is a perfect example of Law 12. Use selective honesty and generosity to disarm your victim. And then you have someone like Sun Tzu, the Chinese military strategist. Greene talks about him and how understanding your opponent, that's key to gaining an advantage, which links back to Law 1, never outshine the master.
I see. So you're not only learning about these laws, you're also getting a history lesson along the way.
Exactly. Yeah, it's like reading a history book, but with a focus on power dynamics, how they shaped events.
Right.
It's super engaging. And, you start to see these patterns, how these laws have played out again and again through our history. When I was reading it, I was really struck by Greene's assertion that people who claim to be above these power games are often the most skilled manipulators.
Oh, yeah. He calls them non-players, right?
Yeah.
And he points out that, sometimes flaunting weakness
Yes.
or demanding absolute equality can actually be a very subtle way to gain control.
Oh, totally. Have you ever, had that happen to you where you're like, wait a minute,
Oh, all the time.
I think I'm being played?
And you don't realize it until later, and you're
Yeah.
like, oh,
Wait a minute. Yes.
how did they do that?
Oh, that's sneaky. That's really sneaky.
And I think part of it is, and I don't think he's saying everyone who does that is, intentionally doing it, but
Right.
but I think it's a natural power dynamic to kind of emerge when someone's acting helpless,
Right.
We naturally want to help them.
Right.
And we don't think, oh, they're trying to get something from me. We're just like, oh, let me give them a hand.
Yeah.
But I think it's good to be aware of that, right?
Oh, absolutely. Especially in the workplace.
Yeah.
I can see that happening a lot. Now, Greene also goes into the importance of mastering your emotions.
Yeah.
He's like, even love can cloud your judgment when it comes to these power dynamics.
That's interesting.
Yeah, isn't it?
Yeah.
And he talks about this whole concept of the Janus perspective. Have you heard of this?
Yeah. It's essentially looking to both the past and the future at the same time.
Yes, like the Roman god Janus
Yeah,
with the 2 faces.
exactly. And I think what he's getting at there is learning from our past mistakes
Yeah.
and using those lessons to inform our present actions and
Yeah.
kind of anticipate future problems
Right.
to get ahead of the game.
Yes, to stay one step ahead. To be strategic.
It'd be strategic, exactly.
And it's interesting because You know, like we're often told to follow your heart, follow your passion. But he's saying like, no, no, no. Sometimes you need to detach.
Yeah. You need to be more calculated.
Yes.
And I think there's something to be said for that.
Okay, now for the part that really, it made me a little uncomfortable, to be honest.
Okay.
Greene's stance on deception as like a necessary tool.
Mm-hmm.
In the game of power, he even says like, power is amoral.
Right, right.
Which I kind of struggled with that a little bit. Like, isn't there some moral component to all of this?
Yeah, I think it's tricky because on one hand, I don't think he's saying go out there and be a Machiavellian manipulator.
Right.
Like deceive everyone and get what you want.
Right.
But I think he's saying, look, power dynamics exist.
Okay.
And sometimes people use deception to gain power. So it's important to be aware of that.
Okay.
And to not be naive about it.
Okay, so it's more about observation
I think so.
than like condoning that behavior.
Right. Like understanding that it happens.
Okay.
And that it's a tool that people use.
Okay, that makes me feel a little bit better. But still, I don't know. I'm still wrestling with that a little bit. I think that's going to be something I'm going to be thinking about a lot as we go through this.
Sure.
It's a tough one. One of the things, though, that I did find really fascinating was this whole concept of observation and indirectness.
Right.
Like, he talks about studying people's motivations and kind of taking these, like, indirect paths to achieve your goals. Almost like a chess game.
Yeah.
Right?
Yeah.
Where you're thinking several moves ahead.
Yeah.
And you're not just going for the immediate, like, gratification.
Right.
You're thinking about the long game.
Yeah. You're thinking strategically.
Yes.
About how to position yourself to get what you want.
Yes. And I really like that. I think there's a lot of wisdom in that.
Mm-hmm.
But it's also daunting, right? To be that observant and that strategic, I don't know, I feel like I need like a whiteboard.
Yeah. You need like a whole team of people to help you with this.
Yeah, like, okay, what are they thinking? What am I going to do?
Exactly.
I'm a lot.
But I think it's also, a muscle that we can develop.
Okay.
Right. Like the more we pay attention,
Right, yeah.
the more we observe,
Right.
the better we get at it.
Okay, I like that. So it's a skill we can develop.
Okay.
I'm feeling better.
Good.
I'm feeling empowered, not manipulated. So that's good.
There you go. There you go. So yeah, I mean, I think this is just like the tip of the iceberg, really, with this book. There's so many layers to it.
I know.
And we can really just kind of go down the rabbit hole and explore all these different laws.
Yes. This is going to be so much fun. I can't wait.
I know.
So are you ready to move on to some specifics?
Yeah. I think it's time to like really unpack some of these power plays.
Okay.
And see how they work in the real world.
Okay, let's do it. Let's unlock these secrets.
Let's do it. All right, so let's get into some specific laws here. So let's jump right in with Law 1, never outshine the master. It feels incredibly relevant even in today's world.
Absolutely. This law highlights the importance of understanding the often unspoken insecurities of those in positions of authority. Think about it. Those in power, they want to feel superior, not threatened.
It's that classic case of don't upstage the boss, right?
Exactly. Greene even argues that sometimes appearing less intelligent than your superior can be incredibly beneficial. It's about strategic self-deprecation. Imagine mastering the art of asking guiding questions that subtly lead your boss to a solution, making them feel like they came up with the brilliant idea themselves.
So it's not about diminishing your own intelligence, but rather amplifying their perception of it.
Precisely. And to illustrate this point, Greene uses the story of Nicolas Fouquet, the finance minister under Louis XIV, the Sun King himself.
Oh, yeah.
Fouquet, in an attempt to impress the king, threw a lavish party so extravagant it completely overshadowed any event the king had ever hosted.
Oh, I can already see where this is going. Not a smart move.
Not at all. Louis XIV, known for his love of grandeur, felt utterly threatened by Fouquet's display of wealth and extravagance.
So what happened? Did Fouquet get a slap on the wrist and a stern talking to?
Let's just say Louis XIV wasn't known for his subtle approach. Fouquet was accused of embezzlement, likely on trumped-up charges, found guilty, and imprisoned for life.
Talk about an overreaction.
It might seem extreme, but it perfectly illustrates the dangers of eclipsing those in power. It's a stark reminder that sometimes the best way to climb the ladder is to make sure those above you feel secure enough to let you keep climbing.
It's a delicate dance, isn't it? This
Right.
whole idea of navigating ambition while respecting the existing power structure makes you wonder, what happens when friendships get caught in this web of power?
That's where Law 2 comes in. Never put too much trust in friends. Learn how to use enemies.
Okay, that one sounds a little ruthless. Should we all be swapping out our friends for former rivals?
Not quite. But Greene argues that former enemies can actually be surprisingly loyal allies. They've seen your strength firsthand, they have more to prove, and they're less likely to take your support for granted.
It's like that saying, keep your friends close and your enemies closer. But instead of just keeping them close, Greene's suggesting we bring them over to our side.
Precisely. He highlights Michael III of the Byzantine Empire as a cautionary tale. Michael chose his close friend, Basilius, as his advisor. Now, Basilius had zero political experience and, well, let's just say things didn't end well.
Let me guess, Basilius staged a coup and took over.
You catch on quick. It's a classic case of misplaced trust. Familiarity breeds, if not contempt, then a dangerous level of presumption. Friends can become complacent, envious, and feel entitled to special treatment.
So how do we apply this to, say, a more everyday scenario, like in the workplace, for example?
It's about being cautious of who you give your trust to, especially when it comes to matters of power or influence. Just because someone is a friend doesn't mean they'll always have your best interests at heart, especially when ambition enters the equation. It's almost like that old adage, keep your enemies closer, takes on a whole new meaning in the context of power.
It really makes you rethink your alliances, doesn't it? Speaking of shifting dynamics, what about this one? Law 28. Enter action with boldness. It seems especially relevant in today's world where it's all about making a splash.
Absolutely. This law is all about understanding that a strong first impression can be a powerful tool. It's about projecting confidence and capability, even if it means taking calculated risks. Greene argues that timidity can often be mistaken for weakness, while boldness, even if it's a carefully crafted persona, suggests an air of competence.
And who embodies this more than Victor Lustig, the man who actually managed to sell the Eiffel Tower?
Twice.
Twice!
Lustig was a master of audacity. He created a sense of urgency, playing on people's greed and their desire to be in the know. He understood that people are drawn to those who exude confidence and a sense of adventure, even if it borders on outrageous.
I imagine he was quite the showman.
Absolutely. And that leads us perfectly into Law 37. Create compelling spectacles.
The power of a good show. We touched on this earlier with P.T. Barnum, but it seems like this goes beyond just putting on a grand production.
Think of it as stagecraft applied to power. Greene argues that spectacle is a powerful tool for shaping perception. A memorable event, a grand gesture, even if carefully orchestrated, can cement an image or a message far more effectively than logic or reason ever could.
It's almost like a distraction technique, taking the focus away from the details and replacing it with a grand, sweeping narrative.
Precisely. And P.T. Barnum, with his elaborate hoaxes and captivating shows, was a master of this. He knew how to create an illusion of grandeur that captured the imagination. Remember his infamous buffalo hunt, staged right in the heart of New Jersey.
So bad it was brilliant.
Exactly. People remember the experience, the thrill of it all, not the finer details. They were swept up in the spectacle.
It's almost as if we're wired to respond to these grand displays, even if we know on some level that it's all a carefully crafted illusion.
Precisely. It speaks to the power of emotion and spectacle in shaping our perceptions.
So we've talked about outshining, befriending enemies, boldness, and the allure of spectacle. What other gems of wisdom are hidden within Greene's laws of power?
This next one is a personal favorite. Law 11. Learn to keep people dependent on you.
Is this about building a loyal following? Those who are indebted to you?
It's about making yourself indispensable, becoming the go-to person, the one with the knowledge, the skills, the connections that others rely on.
Like becoming the linchpin, the one everyone turns to when they need something done right?
Precisely. Greene uses Michelangelo as a prime example.
Oh, okay.
He was notoriously demanding with a fiery temperament, yet his artistic genius was so undeniable that patrons, even someone as powerful as Lorenzo de' Medici, tolerated his eccentricities.
They needed his talent, so they put up with his, shall we say, less desirable qualities.
Exactly. Michelangelo understood his value and leveraged it. He made himself indispensable by being exceptional, even if it meant pushing the boundaries of acceptable behavior.
That's a risky strategy, though, isn't it? Walking that fine line between confidence and arrogance.
It is. It requires a deep understanding of social dynamics, of knowing how far to push without alienating those you seek to influence.
So it's about finding that sweet spot between being essential and being unbearable.
Precisely. It's about reading people's needs and motivations and using that knowledge to subtly guide their actions. You make yourself the solution to their problems, the answer to their ambitions.
That's fascinating. It makes you wonder, how do you actually build that dependence without raising red flags? What happens when you need to assert yourself more directly in the game of power?
Well, that's where we delve into the more aggressive strategies like Law 15, crush your enemy. Totally.
Whoa, that takes a dark turn. Is Greene suggesting we channel our inner Machiavelli and eliminate all competition no matter the cost?
Not quite, though he certainly advocates for a strategic approach to dealing with rivals. The key takeaway here is that half measures can be dangerous, especially when it comes to matters of power. A wounded enemy, as Greene puts it, is far more likely to seek revenge and undermine your position.
So it's better to, for lack of a better term, go for the jugular and neutralize the threat entirely.
In essence, yes. But it's not necessarily about physical force. It's about being strategic, dismantling their power base, isolating them, and ensuring that they pose no further threat to your ambitions.
He brings up the story of the Chinese warlord Shang Yu, right? The one who had his rival Liu Pang cornered but showed mercy instead of delivering the final blow.
Exactly. And that act of mercy proved to be a fatal mistake. Liu Pang seized the opportunity, regrouped, and ultimately defeated Shang Yu, who, consumed by the shame of his defeat, took his own life.
That's a cautionary tale if I've ever heard one. Shows you the dangers of hesitation when it comes to matters of power.
Precisely. Now, Greene does offer a counterpoint to this law, suggesting that there are times when it's more advantageous to let your enemy self-destruct.
A little strategic patience, perhaps, letting them dig their own grave.
Exactly. Sometimes the best way to conquer an opponent is to simply step back and let their own miscalculations be their undoing.
It's like that saying, never interrupt your enemy when they're making a mistake.
Precisely. And it requires a keen sense of observation, a deep understanding of your opponent's weaknesses, and the ability to exploit those weaknesses without directly engaging in conflict.
So sometimes the most effective strategy is to simply sit back, observe, and wait for the opportune moment to strike. Or perhaps not strike at all and let gravity take its course.
Precisely. It's about choosing your battles wisely and understanding that sometimes the best way to win a war is to outmaneuver your opponent, not necessarily to engage them head-on.
How do you maintain a position of power once you've attained it?
That's where Law 18 comes into play. Do not build fortresses to protect yourself. Isolation is dangerous.
That seems counterintuitive. Wouldn't building a secure fortress, shielding yourself from potential threats, be the logical thing to do?
It might seem that way, but Greene argues that true power lies not in physical isolation, but in connection, in being at the center of things and constant contact with the world around you.
So it's more about building bridges than walls.
Precisely. Isolation, while offering a sense of security in the short term, ultimately leads to stagnation, to a disconnect from the very forces that shape and influence the world.
It's like living in an echo chamber, cut off from diverse perspectives and valuable information.
Exactly. And to illustrate this point, Greene brings up Louis XIV and his opulent palace of Versailles. Now, Versailles, for all its grandeur, wasn't just a symbol of Louis XIV's power, it was also a strategic tool for managing his court.
He kept his friends close and his enemies even closer.
Precisely. By keeping them within arm's reach, he could monitor their every move, control the flow of information, and ensure that no one posed a serious threat to his reign.
So it's about being in the thick of things, even if it means exposing yourself to a certain degree of risk?
Exactly. It's about understanding that true power lies in staying connected, in being at the pulse of the action, even if it means stepping outside your comfort zone and embracing a certain level of vulnerability.
That takes a certain amount of courage, wouldn't you say? To be in the arena, so to speak, rather than watching from the sidelines.
Absolutely. It's about understanding that power is not a static thing. It's a dynamic force that requires constant engagement, adaptability, and a willingness to navigate the complexities of human relationships.
So it's not just about attaining power, it's about mastering the art of wielding it effectively and understanding that isolation, while tempting, can be the very thing that leads to its downfall. It seems like true power isn't about building walls to shut the world out, but about creating a space where you're at the center of the action.
Precisely. It's about understanding that knowledge is power, but only when you have access to the right knowledge at the right time.
It's like that saying, information is power. But it's the filtering and application of that information that truly matters.
Exactly. And that requires a keen sense of discernment, the ability to separate signal from noise and to identify the key players and trends that are shaping the landscape around you.
So it's not just about being connected, it's about being discerning in your connections, choosing quality over quantity.
Absolutely. It's about understanding that every interaction, every relationship is a potential opportunity for influence, but only if you approach it with a strategic mindset. And just like in chess, sometimes the most effective move is not the most obvious one.
Speaking of not so obvious moves, I'm curious about Law 29. Plan all the way to the end. It seems like this one is all about long-term vision, about thinking several steps ahead.
Absolutely. This law highlights a common pitfall in the pursuit of power: the tendency to get so caught up in achieving immediate goals that we neglect to consider the long-term consequences of our actions.
It's like that saying, winning the battle but losing the war. You might achieve a short-term victory, but at what cost?
Precisely.
Mm.
Greene uses the story of Vasco Núñez de Balboa, the Spanish conquistador who discovered the Pacific Ocean, to illustrate this point.
I remember reading about him. Wasn't he known for his ambition and ruthlessness?
He was, but despite his ambition and daring, Balboa ultimately fell victim to his own lack of foresight. He was so focused on the immediate goal of finding gold that he neglected to secure his position and forge alliances that could have protected him in the long run.
So he achieved his goal of finding the Pacific Ocean, but he failed to anticipate the political maneuvering and betrayals that would ultimately lead to his downfall.
Precisely. It's a classic example of how short-sightedness can undermine even the most impressive achievements. True power lies not just in reaching the summit, but in knowing how to stay there.
It's like climbing Mount Everest. Getting to the top is an incredible feat, but if you don't have a plan for getting back down safely, your victory could easily turn into a tragedy.
Exactly. And that's what Law 29 is all about. Thinking through every possible outcome, anticipating potential obstacles, and having a strategy in place for dealing with setbacks and consolidating your gains.
It's about playing the long game, not just the short game. It seems like a lot of these laws are about understanding human nature, both our strengths and our weaknesses.
Absolutely. Greene argues that true power lies not just in understanding the mechanics of influence, but also in mastering the art of persuasion, winning hearts and minds.
Which brings us to Law 43. Work on the hearts and minds of others. This one feels especially relevant in today's world, where authenticity and emotional connection are more important than ever.
Absolutely. Greene understood that true power isn't just about wielding authority. It's about inspiring loyalty, building trust, and creating a shared sense of purpose.
It's about connecting with people on an emotional level, understanding their motivations, their desires, their fears, and speaking to them in a way that resonates with their deepest values.
Precisely. And it requires a certain degree of empathy, the ability to see the world through the eyes of others and to understand what makes them tick.
So it's not just about projecting your own vision onto the world, it's about understanding the hopes and dreams of others and finding ways to align your goals with theirs.
Exactly. It's about creating win-win scenarios where everyone feels like they have something to gain by supporting your vision.
That makes a lot of sense. It seems like so much of power dynamics comes down to persuasion, to influencing how others perceive you and your ideas.
Absolutely. And Greene offers a fascinating technique for enhancing your powers of persuasion, one that we touched on briefly earlier: mirroring.
Mirroring, you mean like subtly imitating someone's behavior, their body language, their tone of voice?
Exactly. It's a technique that's often used unconsciously, but when applied deliberately, it can be a powerful tool for building rapport and creating a sense of connection.
It's like you're creating an instant bond by subtly reflecting back the other person's mannerisms, making them feel seen and understood.
Precisely. And when people feel understood, they're more likely to be receptive to your ideas, more likely to see you as an ally rather than an adversary.
That's fascinating. It seems like mirroring is all about subtly affirming the other person, making them feel like you're on the same wavelength.
Exactly. And when you can create that sense of shared reality, of being in sync with someone, you open up a whole new level of influence.
It's almost like you're speaking their language, both literally and figuratively.
Precisely. And when you can communicate with someone on that level, the possibilities for persuasion are endless.
Wow. This is all incredibly insightful. It seems like Greene's 48 Laws of Power is more than just a guidebook for climbing the corporate ladder or navigating the political arena. It's a deep dive into the complexities of human nature, ambition, and the timeless dance of influence.
Absolutely. It's a book that challenges our assumptions about power, revealing its subtle nuances and its often paradoxical nature.
It's definitely given me a lot to think about.
Is there anything else that you think we should kind of touch on before we wrap up?
Yeah, there's a few more. I think one that's really interesting is Law 4. Always say less than necessary.
Oh, that's a tough one.
Yeah,
Especially for me, I like to talk.
right. But Greene makes the point that sometimes silence can be incredibly powerful.
Okay, yeah, I can see that, like in a negotiation or something.
Right.
If you give away too much information, you lose your advantage.
Exactly.
Okay, so it's like choosing your words carefully, not oversharing.
Right. Leaving a little mystery.
Okay, so it's not about like being secretive or anything. It's just about being strategic.
Strategic. Yeah, exactly.
You know, as we've been talking about all these laws, I've noticed a theme here. Control.
Oh, yeah.
Like control your emotions, control your words, control your image.
Hmm.
It's all about like being in the driver's seat.
I think you're right. Power is about control,
Mhm.
but it's not about like dominating others. It's more about influence, persuasion,
Okay.
positioning yourself strategically.
Okay. Wow. Okay, law number 6.
This one might seem a little counterintuitive.
Okay, hit me.
It's court attention at all costs.
Isn't that a bit like attention seeking?
Wait.
It might seem that way.
Like, shouldn't we let our accomplishments speak for themselves?
Yes.
Okay.
But in a world overflowing with information and distractions,
Right.
standing out is essential. Greene argues that strategically courting attention is crucial for building influence and achieving your goals.
So it's not enough to be good. You have to be seen as good.
Precisely.
Okay.
But it's not about being obnoxious or desperate.
Right.
It's about offering something unique, something that sets you apart. Think Leonardo da Vinci.
The ultimate Renaissance man, right?
Exactly.
Painter, inventor, scientist, like the list goes on and on.
It does.
Right. He was a master of so many things.
He was a master of everything, it seemed.
So to court attention, do we need to all embrace our inner Renaissance person, constantly learning, exploring?
Think of it as constantly evolving.
Okay.
It's not simply about like what you know,
Right.
but how you apply your knowledge in new and unexpected ways.
Okay.
And of course, being able to showcase your talents and accomplishments in a way that's compelling. So a little self-promotion is key.
Strategic self-promotion. Strategic.
That's right. It's not about bragging.
Right.
It's about generating intrigue, a desire to learn more. It's about crafting a compelling narrative around your work, around who you are.
This has given me a lot to think about.
Good.
So after diving into this world of power dynamics, the ins and outs of how power works, what's the big takeaway? What should our listeners walk away with?
I think it's about awareness. Right?
Yeah.
You know, understanding the forces at play in human interactions, you know, the subtle ways we influence each other. You've got this framework now to decode those interactions, a new way to see the world.
That's powerful.
It is. And now the question is, how are you going to use this knowledge? It's your choice.
And that's the real power, right? The power to choose, to act intentionally, to navigate relationships and situations with this new understanding. This has been great. We've only scratched the surface here, though. There's so much more to explore. 48 laws. If any of these laws, if they piqued your interest, I encourage you to, check out the book, read more about them, see how they might apply to your own life. Because, power dynamics, they're everywhere.
Everywhere. You can't escape them.
So the more you understand them, the better equipped you'll be to navigate, everything. The world.